Very good morning, friends. I hope you're all safe and healthy. We've been continuing with a series of fair value measurements in this 113. And the most interesting part has been that we have not even seen the definition of the fair value, except that we just had a look, here and there. But we've hardly had a look on the definition of fair value. And I think now we are ready with all the backgrounds we've obtained that we can now look at the definition of fair value. And trust me, we've almost, done with almost all the aspects of the fair value, or I would say at least the technical aspects of the fair value. So now I think it's time to come to the definition of what is a fair value. Now there would be a few aspects which would need a little more attention and which I'm going to discuss in the definition. Let's find out in detail. संडे के संडे 12 बजे एक कंपटीशन होता है स्कॉलरशिप पूल का, जिसके अंदर 1 करोड़ का, जी हाँ आपने ठीक सुना, 1 करोड़ का स्कॉलरशिप पूल है। इस संडे 12 बजे आप जो बच्चे इंटर की तैयारी कर रहे हैं वो इस कंपटीशन के अंदर पार्ट ले सकते हैं। करना कुछ नहीं है, आपने केवल अनअकैडमी की ऐप डाउनलोड करनी है और आप लाइव टेस्ट ले सकते हैं। डाउनलोड करके ऐप आप टेस्ट को अनलॉक कर सकते हैं। मेरा कोड इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं CAKB10। इसके अंदर आपको 60 मिनट्स, 1 घंटे में 40 क्वेश्चंस आंसर करने हैं और इस 1 करोड़ के पूल में से डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द रैंक्स आपको इस पर प्लस सब्सक्रिप्शंस की 1 साल की सब्सक्रिप्शंस फ्री मिलेंगी। तो आइए इस लाइव टेस्ट को लीजिए और इसके अंदर खूब सारे इनाम जीतिए। सो लेट्स crack it. Well, if we read the definition of fair value which is given in the Appendix A to Index 113, you know what I've done? I've just highlighted a little focus words in the definition. It says the price that would be received to sell an asset or paid to transfer a liability. Now, if you remember, we've had 2 focus points in terms of the fair value measurement. One is that it is a market-based assessment. So that means one of the focus word is the price. Now, when I look at the focus word in terms of price, 2 things comes to my mind when I look at the price. One is that price is supposed to be computed, which is a market-based assessment and not entity-specific. So all that knowledge in terms of the 3-step we identified, in terms of principal market and in terms of the most advantageous market should immediately flow to your mind. The second concept which I gave you in the previous video was that as far as the fair value is concerned, it is supposed to be an exit price and not an entry price. And when we looked at the concept of entry and exit price, we already saw that in terms of the asset, it is the money it is the amount which you're going to receive to sell, and in terms of liability, what you're going to pay to transfer and not settle. And that's a part of the definition. So indirectly, we've already understood what is the concept of price in terms of the fair value definition. Then it says in an orderly transaction. So we need to understand what is an orderly transaction. And between market participants, so we need to understand what is a market participants, and then it says at the measurement date. So frankly speaking, when I look at the definition at this stage, I see a total of 4 focus points in the definition. The focus point 1 is the concept of price, which reminds you that as far as the concept of price is concerned, it has to be a market-based assessment. It is supposed to be a concept of an exit price, so that should come to your mind. The second focus point is that it should be an orderly transaction, which we're going to see. The third focus point is in terms of market participants, which we're going to go through. And the fourth one is the measurement date. And as far as the measurement date is concerned, let me tell you right away. When we calculate a fair value measurement is supposed to be, triggered by the application of other indices. We've already seen earlier that fair value measurement gets triggered because of the other indices. So whether it is a measurement requirement of some other index or it's a disclosure requirement of some other index, it triggers me and brings me to index 113. Now this measurement could be for the purpose of initial recognition, or this measurement could be for the purpose of, subsequent measurement of an asset or liability. So when you say a measurement date is, again, we can say that it could be for the purpose of initial recognition or a subsequent measurement. So I think the only two terms which now need attention to appreciate the definition of fair value is orderly transactions and market participants. Let's see. So I've already said that I've got a total of 4 focus parameters on the definition, and I said the price has got a concept in terms of market-based and not entity-based. And then I said it's an exit price and not an entry price. All these two aspects we have already discussed. Now there is another 2 aspects related to the concept of price which we are yet to discuss, which I'm going to discuss that in the next video with you. One is the concept of what you call a unit of account. Don't get worried what is a unit of account. And there are some para number 11 considerations to be kept in mind. So when I look at the fair value measurement, one of the key areas is the price. So when you look at a price, what should start running into your mind is, okay, it's a market-based assessment, not entity-based. It is an exit price and not an entry price. There is a unit of account, something which needs to be decided for measurement purposes, and there are some para number 11 considerations to be kept in mind. That is the focus in terms of price. Now, coming to the aspect of what is an orderly transaction, so I would put it simply, an orderly transaction means that it is supposed to be not a forced transaction. It is not something we can say that, when you're looking at an asset, it is a distress sale. We were forced to make a sale. Because the idea in terms of the fair value measurement, that we should always try to maximize a fair value for an asset. And we should always try to minimize the fair value for a liability. Ind-AS 113 focuses on the fact that fair value measurement is supposed to be, the amount which you receive to sell. So you need to maximize the amount which you're going to sell. And in terms of liability, we need to basically, go in for minimization of the amount which you will pay in order to transfer a liability. So we need to consider that when you're looking at a fair value measurement, it should be a normal sale. It should not be a forced transaction. And lastly, when we look at the definition in terms of the concept of market participants, we already said, if you remember in the previous video, where I was talking in terms of, a bank and a counterparty X. And I said, when you determine a fair value, you start looking into a hypothetical transaction. So you start thinking not in terms of, the real buyer and the real seller, but you start thinking in terms of creating a hypothetical market and start thinking that, if a transaction was done between, a buyer and seller in a hypothetical transaction, like, we did in terms of a counterparty X and Y. So when you're going to determine a fair value and when you're going to create that hypothetical situation of transactions, then the two parties, the buyer and sellers, should have, a total of 4 characteristics. And the 4 characteristics are given in the Ind-AS. One is they're independent of each other. They should not be related. They should not be related under the purview of Ind-AS 24. But nevertheless, it does not preclude, determining a fair value between related party, provided they have actually dealt at a normal commercial transaction terms. They need to be knowledgeable and they should be able to enter into the transaction, and at the same time, they should be willing to enter. So if they've got all those 4 characteristics, then we can say that yes, they can be considered as market participants for a hypothetical transaction in determination of the fair value. Now, as a part of this definition, there is one more aspect which needs attention, which I'm going to cover in the next video. Not that we're going to wind up with the concept of fair value. There is much more, coming in terms of fair value, because this is a beautiful standard and it has got some very beautiful aspects attached to it. So that's all for this particular video. Thank you, take care, and bye-bye.